The grand imperial court of the Zalrith Empire was silent. Not the calm silence of peace, but the heavy silence of power. Thousands of alien nobles filled the vast chamber, their robes glowing with status colors, their eyes fixed on the long central path that led to the throne. Above them, floating banners displayed the victories of the empire across centuries. The air itself seemed to hum with authority. At the far end of the hall sat the emperor. He was massive, ancient, and draped in living armor that shifted like dark water. His many eyes watched everything at once. This was the ruler who had broken worlds, who had bent species to his will, who believed himself eternal. The doors at the far end of the hall opened. Guards marched forward in perfect formation. Between them walked a single figure, a human. He wore no armor. His clothes were torn and stained from long travel. Thick energy chains wrapped around his arms, chest, and legs, glowing with suppression fields, designed to weaken even the strongest beings. Each step he took echoed loudly against the polished floor. Whispers spread through the court. A human? Why bring such a weak creature here? Is this the one accused of rebellion? The human's name was Elias Ward. He did not struggle. He did not lower his head. His face showed exhaustion, but not fear. His eyes remained steady as he walked forward. Even as thousands of alien gazes judged him, the guards forced him to stop before the throne. One guard struck the floor with the butt of his weapon. "Prisoner delivered, Your Majesty," the guard announced. The human envoy accused of treason, interference in imperial affairs, and unauthorized alliance with restricted territories. The emperor leaned forward slightly. "So," the emperor said, his voice deep and layered, echoing through the chamber. "This is the human who dared to act without permission." The emperor's eyes narrowed. "You stand in chains before the greatest empire in this galaxy," he continued. "Your species was allowed to exist only because it was insignificant." Laughter rippled through the nobles. Elias remained silent. The emperor tilted his head. "Have you lost your tongue, human? Or has fear finally taken it?" Still, Elias did not speak. The emperor rose from his throne. The movement alone caused many nobles to bow instinctively. He descended a few steps, towering over the human. "Your people were warned," the emperor said. "You were told to stay within your borders, to observe, to obey. Instead, you interfered in matters far beyond your understanding." Elias finally lifted his head fully. His eyes met the emperor's. "I understand more than you think," Elias said calmly. The court gasped. No one spoke to the emperor like that. The emperor's eyes flashed with anger. "You dare answer without permission?" "I dare to tell the truth," Elias replied. A murmur spread through the hall. Guards tightened their grip on their weapons. The emperor laughed, a cold, sharp sound. "The truth?" he said. "A human in chains believes he carries truth into my court?" Elias nodded once. "Yes." The emperor waved one clawed hand. "Then entertain us," he said mockingly. "You may speak before you are sentenced." The chains around Elias pulsed, tightening briefly. He inhaled slowly and began. "You accuse me of rebellion," Elias said. "But I came here willingly. I allowed myself to be chained, because this court needed to see me this way." The nobles exchanged confused looks. "See you as what?" one noble scoffed. "A defeated human?" "No," Elias said. "As proof." The emperor leaned back, intrigued despite himself. "Proof of what?" "Of how far this empire has fallen from its own laws," Elias answered. The court erupted in noise. "How dare you?" "Silence him. Execute him now." The emperor raised a hand, and the noise stopped instantly. "You speak boldly for someone moments away from death," the emperor said. "Explain yourself." Elias looked around the chamber, at the banners, the symbols, the ancient carvings etched into the walls. "These symbols," Elias said, "once meant protection, balance, duty to the galaxy, not conquest." The emperor's eyes darkened. "You claim to understand our history better than we do?" "No," Elias replied. "I claim you erased parts of it." A ripple of discomfort passed through the court. The emperor stepped closer again. "You will choose your next words carefully." Elias turned his gaze not toward the emperor but toward a section of the court hidden behind layered energy veils. The nobles noticed. "What are you looking at, human?" the emperor demanded. Elias spoke clearly. "I am addressing the one this court pretends does not exist." A sharp silence fell. Some nobles stiffened. Others looked uneasy. "That is enough," the emperor said harshly. "There is no one else here with authority." Elias shook his head. "That is the lie," he said, "and you know it." The emperor's claws tightened. "You will name who you speak of," the emperor commanded. Elias took a slow breath. "There is an alien queen," he said. "A rightful ruler, bound by ancient law. A ruler whose authority predates your throne." The court exploded in shock. "That name is forbidden. There is no queen. She was erased." The emperor roared, and the sound shook the chamber. "Silence," he thundered. "That title is myth, a story for fools." Elias did not flinch. "You erased her because she would not rule through fear," Elias said. "You erased her because she believed the empire should protect, not dominate." The emperor advanced, fury burning in his eyes. "You accuse me of treason against my own empire?" "I accuse you of breaking the oath your ancestors swore," Elias replied. The emperor raised his hand, energy gathering around his claws. "Enough," he snarled. "You will die for this." Before the strike could fall, Elias spoke again quietly, but with certainty. "She is here." The energy in the emperor's hand flickered. The court froze. Elias kept his gaze fixed on the veiled section. "You watched as worlds burned," Elias said. "You watched as your people were scattered and silenced. And you waited. Because you knew this day would come." The veils began to shimmer. A low hum filled the chamber. The nobles gasped as ancient systems, untouched for centuries, began to activate. "No," the emperor whispered. From behind the veils, a tall figure stepped forward. Her presence alone changed the air. She wore no crown, yet power radiated from her. Her eyes were calm, ancient, and unafraid. Symbols on the floor lit up beneath her feet, symbols no one had seen active in generations. The court fell into stunned silence. Elias finally lowered his head not in defeat, but in respect. "My queen," he said softly. The emperor staggered back one step. "That is impossible," he hissed. "You were exiled, stripped of authority." The queen's voice was steady and clear when she spoke. "I was never stripped," she said. "Only hidden." The ancient symbols responded to her voice, glowing brighter. Elias's chains flickered. Not breaking yet, but weakening. The queen looked at Elias, then at the emperor. "You brought him here in chains," she said, thinking him powerless. Her gaze swept across the court. "You forgot," she continued, "that humans are persistent. And that truth survives even when buried." The nobles began to tremble. Some lowered their heads without realizing it. The emperor roared in rage, but uncertainty had crept into his voice. "This changes nothing," he shouted. "I still rule." The queen raised one hand. The entire court's defense grid powered down. Instantly, Elias felt the chains loosen slightly. The queen spoke one final sentence, her voice echoing through the hall. "This court will listen," she said. "Whether it wishes to or not." The human in chains stood quietly beside her. And for the first time in centuries, the empire felt fear, not of rebellion, but of truth. The imperial court did not move. Thousands of nobles stood frozen as the alien queen remained at the center of the ancient symbols. The light beneath her feet pulsed slowly, as if the floor itself recognized her presence after centuries of silence. Elias stood beside her. The energy chains around his body dimmer now, no longer burning with full strength. He felt it clearly. Something old had awakened. The emperor stared at the queen, his many eyes wide with disbelief and rage. "This is deception," the emperor said sharply. "A trick, using forgotten systems." The queen turned her gaze toward him. Her eyes held no anger, only certainty. "You know these systems cannot be tricked," she replied. "They answer only to royal authority bound by oath." Several nobles shifted uneasily. They had grown up hearing legends of a queen who ruled before the empire hardened into conquest. A ruler erased from history. Spoken of only in whispers. "You were declared unfit to rule," the emperor said. "You were removed for the good of the empire, for the good of your ambition." The queen answered calmly. The symbols brightened again. Elias watched the nobles closely. Some stared at the floor. Others stared at the queen with fear, awe, or quiet hope. The court was no longer united. The emperor pointed at Elias. "And this human," he growled. "Why does he stand beside you? Why does he speak with such confidence in my court?" The queen looked at Elias. "He stands here because your empire abandoned my people," she said. "And humanity did not." The room grew tense. Elias felt every eye on him. The emperor laughed, harsh and mocking. "Humans? Protectors?" he scoffed. "They were barely noticed when the stars were divided." Elias raised his head. "We were noticed," he said evenly. "Just not respected." The queen nodded. "When my territories were cut off," she continued. "When my fleets were destroyed and my people scattered, the empire closed its borders." She stepped forward slowly. With each step, ancient markings lit across the floor, spreading outward like veins of light. "My people sent distress calls," she said. "They were ignored, declared irrelevant." The queen turned to the court, but one signal reached human space. A murmur spread. Elias remembered that moment clearly. The signal was weak, damaged, almost lost in cosmic noise. Many in the human council had argued to ignore it. It was outside their borders, outside their responsibility, but not outside their conscience. "We answered," Elias said. The emperor sneered. "And what could humans possibly do?" The queen answered instead. "They escorted refugees through hostile regions," she said. "They shielded broken ships with their own. They stood between my people and extinction." Images appeared above the court as ancient record systems activated. Holograms showed human ships escorting alien civilians, repairing damaged hulls, holding defensive lines far beyond their own territory. The nobles watched in stunned silence. "These records were sealed," one noble whispered. "They were hidden," the queen replied. "Just as I was." The emperor stepped back slightly. "You violated imperial law," he said. "Unauthorized intervention. That human should have been punished." "He was," the queen said quietly. Elias closed his eyes briefly. "I was detained," he said. "Threatened. Isolated. Labeled. Dangerous." The queen looked at him with respect. "And yet," she said, "he never revealed my survival. Never demanded reward. Never asked humanity to rise in dominance." Elias opened his eyes. "We made a promise," he said. "We protect. We don't rule." The words struck harder than any threat. The court shifted again. Some nobles lowered their heads. The emperor's voice trembled not with fear, but with something close to it. "You expect this court to kneel because of charity?" he demanded. "Because of hidden aid?" The queen raised her hand, and the holograms changed. Now they showed imperial fleets retreating from border systems long thought secure. "Your borders held," the queen said, "because humans stood where you would not." "Overstack," the nobles gasped. "That is impossible," one shouted. "Those regions were stable." "They were stable," Elias said, "because we kept them that way." The emperor roared. "Enough," he shouted. "Guards!" The guards hesitated. Their weapons did not power up. They looked at their displays in confusion. "The defense grid is locked," one guard said nervously. "Imperial override denied." The queen's voice was calm. "Ancient law," she said. "Royal safeguard. It activates when the empire strays too far from its oath." The emperor's authority was slipping. Elias felt the chains loosen further. They no longer pressed into his skin. They hung heavy, inactive. The queen turned fully toward the court. "You taught your people that humans were fragile," she said. "That they lacked the strength to matter." She gestured toward Elias. "And yet, when faced with a choice between safety and duty, humanity chose duty." She looked back at the emperor. "You chose fear." The emperor's eyes burned. "I chose survival," he snapped. "You chose control," the queen replied. Silence followed. A noble stepped forward slowly. His crest indicated an ancient house, one that predated the emperor's reign. "Is it true?" the noble asked, voice shaking. "That humanity upheld the old covenant?" The queen met his gaze. "Yes," she said. The noble swallowed, then lowered himself to one knee. The sound echoed loudly. Another noble followed. Then another. The emperor shouted in fury. "Stand up! This is treason." But the movement did not stop. More nobles knelt, not all, but enough. Elias watched, stunned by the moment. Humans had never demanded loyalty, never asked for recognition. Yet here it was. The queen turned to Elias quietly. "You came here knowing this could cost your life," she said. Elias nodded. "Someone had to speak," he replied. "You allowed yourself to be chained," she said. "So the truth would be believed," Elias answered. The queen placed one hand lightly over the control field. The chains around Elias dissolved completely, falling to the floor in silent pieces. The court gasped. The emperor staggered back. "You cannot do this," he said. "I still sit on the throne." The queen looked at him steadily. "You sit there because I allowed it," she said. "Because I believed the empire could remember who it was." She turned to the court. "Look at your emperor," she said. "He rules through silence and fear." She gestured to Elias. "Look at the human," she said. "He came in chains so others could stand free." The difference was clear. The emperor lashed out with words. "This is manipulation," he shouted. "The human has deceived you all." Elias spoke one last time, his voice firm but calm. "If I wanted power," he said, "I would not have come alone." That truth settled heavily. The queen raised her hand again. "This court will hear judgment soon," she said. "But first, you will remember." The ancient systems responded, opening sealed archives across the chamber. The past flooded back into the empire. The emperor looked around as his control crumbled, and for the first time, humanity was no longer unseen. They were acknowledged, not as conquerors, but as guardians who had waited patiently for the truth to surface. The ancient archives opened across the imperial court. Walls that once showed only victories now displayed forgotten memories. Old records, sealed for centuries, streamed through the air in slow-moving light. Battles not recorded in official history. Borders saved quietly, lives protected without praise. The nobles watched in silence. The emperor stood rigid, his claws clenched, his authority fading with every image. Elias stood beside the queen, free of chains now, yet feeling the weight of the moment heavier than any restraint he had worn before. "These records are incomplete," the emperor snapped. "Selective, twisted." The queen did not look at him. "They are complete," she said calmly. "They were hidden because they showed restraint instead of dominance." A recording shifted forward. It showed a distant star system collapsing under pirate raids and environmental failure. Imperial fleets withdrew, marking the system as a loss. Then another fleet arrived. Human ships. They were smaller, fewer, but they positioned themselves between the attackers and the civilians. They repaired orbital stations. They escorted evacuation vessels. They stayed long after the danger passed. The court murmured. "That system was declared empty," a noble whispered. "It was declared inconvenient," the queen replied. The image changed again. Human diplomats negotiating ceasefires between rival species. Human engineers stabilizing alien habitats. Human soldiers standing guard without banners, without demands. Elias spoke quietly. "We didn't announce it," he said, "because we weren't there to be seen." The emperor turned sharply toward him. "You expect this court to believe humans acted without seeking power?" he demanded. Elias met his gaze. "Yes," he said. "Because power gained that way never lasts." The queen nodded. "Humanity honored the first oath," she said. "Protect life, preserve balance, do not rule through fear." The nobles stiffened. The first oath was ancient, older than the current empire. Many believed it symbolic, others believed it inconvenient. The emperor laughed bitterly. "And you claim humans followed this oath while we did not?" "I claim you abandoned it," the queen replied. She stepped forward, her voice echoing through the chamber. "You replaced duty with control," she said. "You taught the empire that safety came from dominance." She turned to the nobles. "But safety built on fear always collapses." A noble commander stepped forward hesitantly. "If this is true," he said, "then why were we never informed? Why were these actions hidden from the council?" The queen looked at the emperor. "Ask him." All eyes turned to the throne. The emperor's many eyes narrowed. "Because they interfered," he said. "Because humans reminded the galaxy that power is a choice." The words slipped out before he could stop them. The court reacted instantly. Murmurs grew louder. Elias felt it. The shift. The Empire was no longer listening as one voice. The Queen raised her hand. "The human standing beside me was sent as a witness," she said. "Not as a threat." Elias took a breath. "I was told to leave those systems alone," he said. "I was warned." He looked around the court. "But I saw families who had no protection. I saw children who didn't care about borders." The silence deepened. "So I made a decision," Elias continued. "As a human, not as a commander, not as a ruler." The Emperor interrupted angrily. "And you decided to defy imperial authority?" "Yes," Elias said simply. "I decided to be responsible." The word hung in the air. Responsibility. Not conquest. Not rebellion. Responsibility. The Queen turned to the court again. "This is why humanity frightens those who rule through fear," she said. "They do not need permission to do what is right." The Emperor stepped down from his throne, his voice rising. "You are poisoning my court," he shouted. "Guards, seize them." The guards did not move. They stood frozen, weapons lowered, eyes flicking between the Emperor and the Queen. "Explain yourselves," the Emperor demanded. One guard spoke, his voice unsteady. "Our command systems still recognize royal authority," he said. "But not yours alone." The Queen nodded slightly. "The Empire was never meant to be ruled by one voice," she said. "It was meant to be guided by balance." The Emperor's breathing grew heavy. "You think this human deserves honor?" he spat. "He broke laws." "Yes," the Queen said. "Unjust ones." A senior noble stepped forward, ancient markings glowing faintly on his robes. "We were told humans were unpredictable," the noble said slowly. "That they could not be trusted." He looked at Elias. "And yet, this human came here alone, in chains." Elias did not respond. The noble turned back to the court. "That is not the action of a conqueror." Another noble stepped forward. "Where was the Empire?" she asked quietly. "When these systems called for aid?" No one answered. The Emperor tried again, his voice lower now. "You kneel because you fear change," he said. "Because you fear losing order." The Queen answered calmly. "No," she said. "They kneel because they remember who they were meant to be." The ancient symbols pulsed brighter. A deep sound echoed through the chamber as the imperial systems fully recognized the Queen's authority. Elias felt a subtle shift in gravity. The room itself seemed to align. The Emperor backed away, his confidence cracking. "You cannot erase me," he said. "I do not need to," the Queen replied. "Your actions have already done that." She turned to Elias. "You kept humanity quiet," she said. "Why?" Elias thought for a moment. "Because the galaxy wasn't ready," he answered. "And because helping doesn't require applause." The court absorbed that. The Queen faced the nobles. "Humanity could have used its actions as leverage," she said. "They did not." She gestured toward Elias. "This human could have revealed everything years ago." "He did not," the Emperor snarled. "And now he does?" Elias nodded. "Because now the truth matters more than safety," he said. The Queen raised her voice. "This court will decide what kind of empire it wishes to be," she said. "One that silences those who act with conscience, or one that remembers its oath." The nobles looked at one another, slowly, deliberately. More of them knelt, not in fear, in recognition. The Emperor watched as support slipped away. "You would abandon me," he said, disbelief in his voice. A noble replied firmly, "We would abandon lies." The Queen stepped closer to the throne. "Your reign ends not with violence," she said, "but with accountability." The Emperor's shoulders sagged. Elias felt something shift inside him. Humanity had never sought this moment. Yet it had arrived anyway. The Queen turned to the court once more. "Judgment will follow," she said. "But first, the Empire must understand what it owes." She placed her hand over her chest. "It owes humanity acknowledgement." The room fell silent. Elias felt hundreds of eyes on him. He spoke softly. "We don't need statues," he said. "We don't need titles." He looked up at the glowing archives. "Just don't erase the truth again." The Queen nodded. "And it will not be erased," she said. The imperial systems locked the archives permanently into public record. Across the galaxy, Signals would soon spread. The truth was no longer hidden. The emperor stood alone. And humanity, once dismissed as fragile, now stood as proof that strength without cruelty endures. The imperial court had never felt so quiet, not the silence of fear, nor the silence of control, but the silence of realization. The kind that followed truth once it could no longer be denied. The alien queen stood before the throne, her presence steady and unyielding. The ancient systems hummed softly around her, no longer reacting in flashes of light, but holding a calm, balanced glow, as if the empire itself had exhaled after centuries of tension. The emperor stood alone. No guards stepped forward. No nobles spoke in his defense. The throne behind him looked suddenly less like a seat of power and more like a reminder of what he had lost. "This court will pass judgment," the queen said, her voice calm but firm. "Not in anger, not in revenge, but in truth." She turned to the nobles who knelt across the chamber. "You were taught obedience," she said. "You were rewarded for silence. But an empire built only on fear forgets how to stand on its own." She gestured toward Elias. "This human came here in chains so the truth would be undeniable," she continued. "He placed himself beneath your judgment because he believed you were still capable of it." Elias stood quietly, hands at his sides. He felt no pride, no desire for praise, only relief that humanity's silence had finally ended. The queen faced the emperor again. "You ruled by narrowing choices," she said. "You erased history, believing control would bring peace." The emperor's voice was low, strained. "And you think openness will save us?" he asked. "You think honoring humans will?" The queen met his gaze. "I think honesty gives us a future," she said. She raised her hand. Ancient symbols flared once, then settled. "By imperial law older than any throne," she declared, "a ruler who breaks the first oath forfeits sole authority." A deep sound echoed through the hall as the throne's control systems disengaged. The emperor staggered back. "No," he said quietly. "This is not how it ends." "It ends without blood," the queen replied. "That is mercy." She turned to the court. "The emperor will stand trial," she said. "Not as an enemy but as a leader held accountable." The nobles bowed their heads. The emperor was escorted away, not by force, but by duty. When he was gone, the weight in the chamber lifted. The queen turned to Elias. "You may speak," she said. Elias hesitated. He had never planned a speech. Humanity had never planned recognition. Still, he stepped forward. "We never wanted to replace anyone," he said simply. "We never wanted control." He looked around the court. "We helped because no one else could. Because once you see suffering, you can't pretend it's not your problem." The nobles listened closely. "We stayed quiet," Elias continued, "because power changes people. And we didn't want to become what we feared." He took a breath. "But silence also has a cost," he said. "It lets lies grow." The queen nodded slowly. "Humanity will not be rewarded with titles," she announced. "They did not act for reward." She raised her voice. "From this moment forward, humanity is recognized as guardians of balance, with equal voice in galactic matters." The court reacted not with noise, but with movement. One by one, nobles rose. Then, in perfect unison, they knelt again, this time facing not the throne, but the queen and the human beside her. The gesture was not submission. It was respect. Elias felt something tighten in his chest. He had stood on ruined worlds. He had watched humanity struggle in silence. And now, without conquest, without threat, the galaxy acknowledged them. The queen turned to him quietly. "Will humanity accept this role?" she asked. Elias nodded. "We always have," he said. The queen smiled faintly. "Then let the record show," she declared, "that humanity did not rise by force but by restraint." Across the chamber, the ancient archives sealed themselves permanently. No edits, no erasure. Truth was now law. The queen addressed the court one final time. "This empire will rebuild," she said. "Not as rulers above others, but as partners among them." She looked toward the stars displayed on the chamber ceiling. "And we will remember who stood with us when it mattered." The court bowed deeply. Later, as the chamber emptied, Elias stood at the edge of the vast hall. "You could stay," the queen said beside him. "Many would follow you. Elias smiled slightly. I think it's better if we don't, he said. Power should always feel temporary. Our. The queen nodded. That may be the most dangerous thing about humans, she said. You know when to walk away. Elias looked out at the stars. We'll still help, he said. Just not from a throne. The queen placed a hand over her chest in respect. Then the galaxy is safer than it knows. As Elias departed the imperial world, signals spread across the stars. Old borders shifted not through war, but through understanding. Worlds once ignored received aid. Treaties were rewritten. And across the galaxy, a quiet question echoed. If humans could change an empire without firing a single shot, what kind of future were they protecting? Elias returned to human space without ceremony. No parades, no monuments, just a message sent quietly across Earth. The truth is out. Keep doing what's right. And humanity did, not as conquerors, not as rulers, but as the steady hands that held the line when others looked away.